Did you know that in the early 1970s, Washington, D.C. was stalked by a faceless killer who hunted young girls, abducted them in broad daylight, and then left their lifeless bodies on highways for the world to see? But here's the most disturbing part. These girls weren't always killed immediately. Some were kept alive for days, fed before their final moments, and then abandoned like discarded objects along busy roads. In one case, the killer even forced a victim to write a chilling note in her own handwriting, mocking the police with a terrifying message. Who was this phantom who could strike again and again in the nation's capital, and yet vanish every time without leaving a single clue? It all began in April 1971 when 13-year-old Carol Spinks stepped out of her home to buy a few groceries from a nearby corner store. It was supposed to be the kind of errand every child ran. 10 minutes out, 10 minutes back, but Carol never returned. Her family panicked, neighbors joined the search, and before long, police were combing through the streets, parks, and alleys of Washington, D.C. For 6 agonizing days, there was no sign of her. And then came the discovery that would mark the beginning of a nightmare. Carol's body was found dumped near the embankment of I-295, one of the city's busiest highways. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled, but what froze investigators in their tracks wasn't just the brutality of the crime. It was the timeline. Evidence suggested Carol hadn't been killed right away. She had been kept alive, hidden, somewhere for days, fed just enough to survive, before finally being murdered. This was not the work of someone striking in a moment of rage. This was the work of a predator who planned every step, who controlled every second, and who killed only when he was ready. Then, almost as if to ensure maximum horror, he left her body in a place where he knew she would eventually be discovered. Just weeks later, the nightmare repeated itself. 10-year-old Darlenia Johnson set out on foot to reach her babysitting job. She never arrived. Again, her family waited in agony, clinging to hope that she might be found alive. But soon the familiar horror returned. Darlenia's body was discovered, just yards from where Carol's had been found, lying off the same stretch of I-295. She had been strangled. She had been left deliberately in plain view. For investigators, this was more than coincidence. The similarities were undeniable. The same age group, the same method, the same highway. This was not random. This was not isolated. This was the beginning of a pattern. One that revealed not just cruelty, but chilling calculation. By now, the city was in shock. Parents refused to let their daughters walk anywhere alone. Children who once played freely in neighborhoods were now ushered quickly indoors before sunset. Streets grew quieter, not because they were safer, but because fear had spread like wildfire. It wasn't just that girls were being killed. It was the way it was happening. Behind closed doors, detectives whispered about the disturbing details. This killer wasn't acting like an ordinary murderer. He was staging his crimes. He was abducting his victims, keeping them alive for days in some hidden place no one had yet found, feeding them, controlling them, and only when he decided their time was up would he strangle them and place their bodies near the highways. It was almost theatrical, like a grim performance designed to terrify the entire city. And it worked. For families, the waiting was unbearable. The girls weren't killed instantly. Instead, they vanished into silence for days, their loved ones, tortured by uncertainty. Not knowing if they were alive, not knowing if there was a chance to save them. The Freeway Phantom, as he came to be called, seemed to thrive on this torment. He wasn't just murdering children. He was manipulating time itself, stretching out the suffering of families before finally ending the lives of their daughters. For investigators, the questions piled higher with each victim. How was he abducting these girls without anyone seeing? Where was he keeping them alive? How was he able to move their bodies to busy roads and highways without a single witness ever coming forward? It was as if the killer moved like a ghost. Always near, always one step ahead, but never leaving a trace behind. Each new body became a message. By leaving them where thousands of commuters would pass daily, the Phantom was sending a chilling signal. I'm here, and you can't stop me. These weren't hurried dump sites chosen in panic. They were deliberate placements designed to be found. They were his signature, and the most disturbing thought of all. If he could abduct, hold, and kill 2 young girls in the middle of the nation's capital without leaving evidence, then he could do it again. At any moment, another child could vanish, another family could be left in limbo, another body could appear along the freeway. The Phantom wasn't just killing, he was orchestrating fear. He stalked, he abducted, he held his victims captive, alive long enough to know they weren't going home. Then when he decided their story was finished, he strangled them and left their bodies as a grim calling card. A reminder that Washington wasn't safe, that he was still out there, watching, waiting, untouchable. By now, one thing was clear. These were not random acts of violence. Washington wasn't facing an ordinary criminal. It was dealing with a predator who thrived on patience, precision, and power. A phantom who seemed to exist only to terrify and destroy. In July 1971, 10-year-old Brenda Woodard vanished after leaving a friend's house. Hours later, her body was discovered along Route 202 in Prince George's County. At first, investigators thought this was just another tragic repeat of the Freeway Phantom's twisted pattern, but then they found something that set Brenda's murder apart from all the others. Something so disturbing that even hardened detectives were shaken. Inside her coat pocket was a folded piece of paper. It wasn't just a random note. It was written in Brenda's own handwriting, but the words were not hers. Investigators quickly realized the note had been dictated by the killer himself, forcing Brenda to write his message before he killed her. The short but chilling text read, "This is tantamount to my insensitivity to people, especially women. I will admit the others when you catch me if you can." It was a taunt, bold, arrogant, and cold. A message designed to mock the police, to humiliate them, to show the world that the Freeway Phantom wasn't just taking lives. He was playing a game in which he alone set the rules, a game in which fear was his greatest weapon. And like all dangerous games, he had no intention of stopping. Over the next year, the killings continued. 12-year-old Nenemoshia Yates was abducted while walking to the store. Her body was found near the Baltimore-Washington Parkway, discarded. Like the others, strangled and left to rot under the open sky. Then came 18-year-old Brenda Crockett, who went missing on her way to a friend's house. In her case, something unusual happened. Her family received mysterious phone calls during her disappearance. A child's voice, believed to be Brenda's, was heard on the line. But the words spoken felt rehearsed, almost as if someone was standing beside her, feeding her what to say. Hours later, her body too was found near a highway. And then, in September 1972, the last known victim, 17-year-old Diane Williams, never made it home after visiting her boyfriend. Her body was dumped along I-295, the same cursed highway where it had all begun. Each crime scene told the same haunting story. Young girls abducted, held alive for days, then strangled and discarded along roads that thousands traveled daily. The killer was always close, always watching, but never caught. And with each new victim, one truth became clear. The Freeway Phantom wasn't just murdering. He was staging his crimes in plain sight, turning Washington's highways into his personal graveyard, daring investigators to stop him if they could. Detectives worked around the clock. The FBI, the DC Metropolitan Police, and even outside agencies poured manpower into the case. Dozens of officers, investigators, and forensic experts tried to untangle the nightmare that had gripped the capital. But every lead, no matter how promising, seemed to collapse into dust. Witnesses couldn't identify anyone. The killer left no fingerprints, no usable DNA, no fibers, nothing concrete to hold on to. It was as if he were a shadow always present, always moving, but never leaving a trace. Even the infamous note found in Brenda Woodard's pocket, which investigators hoped would break the case wide open, only added to the confusion. The handwriting was Brenda's, but the words belonged to someone else. Who was he? A sadistic loner? A manipulative predator with education and intelligence? Or someone who blended into the very neighborhoods he terrorized? At one point, detectives began to wonder if this was not the work of one man at all, but a group. Could it be a gang operating together, abducting girls and sharing in the crimes? That theory gained traction briefly, but like so many others, it lacked evidence. What made the Freeway Phantom case so terrifying wasn't just the brutality of the crimes. It was how the killer moved like a ghost, abducting girls in familiar neighborhoods, keeping them alive for days without anyone noticing, and then leaving their bodies on highways used daily by thousands of commuters. He was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Even today, more than 5 decades later, the case remains unsolved. Families of the victims still wait for answers that may never come. Investigators who once worked the case admit it is one of the darkest unsolved mysteries in American history. So who was the Freeway Phantom? A lone predator who outsmarted the police? A group of killers working together? Or someone hiding in plain sight, protected by a system that never thought to look at him? The truth is, nobody knows. And until we do, the shadow of the Freeway Phantom will always linger over Washington, D.C. A chilling reminder that some monsters are never caught.